All right, now that we're all present and accounted for, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Midwifery Advisory Council meeting. I'm Carrie Sparavon, the chair of this committee. I'd like to remind everybody to please put your cell phones on mute or turn them off. This meeting is being webcasted. If you'd like to provide public comment, please fill out a speaker slip and give it to Ms. Sewell. It's right there. Thank you. The speaker slips are in the back of the room. MAC members, a reminder that during today's meeting and all future MAC meetings, any items requiring a vote will be done by roll call vote. This means that once a motion is made and seconded, Ms. Lowe will call each of our names individually to request our vote, at which time you can vote in favor, against, or abstain. Any questions? Okay.
I just want to remind everyone that the speaker slips are voluntary. You can speak without identifying yourself if you so wish.
That's correct. Thank you for that. All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Ms. Lowe, will you call the roll, please?
Dr. Adams? Here. Ms. Dugan?
Yes.
Ms. Holzer?
Here.
Ms. Marcelin?
Present.
Ms. Yaroslavsky?
Present.
Ms. Sparavon?
Present.
We have a quorum.
All right. Agenda item 2, public comments on items that are not on the agenda. This is a time for members of the public to comment on something that we're not going to actually talk about today. Are there any public comments on items not on the agenda? Seeing none, we're going to move to our next agenda item. Agenda item 3 is approval of the Midwifery Advisory Council meeting minutes from the August 18th, 2016 meeting.
So moved.
All right. I have a couple of things, and
Questions, I'm sure.
I apologize, Natalie. I didn't look at it until last night.
So you can have a motion to approve and second and or not?
Okay, but we're going to have to approve them as amended.
No, you.
Oh, okay. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
You do.
Second. Okay, now we can talk about it?
Right.
Okay, got it. Thank you. All right. It's my understanding that Ms. Lowe did not receive any edits prior to today's meeting. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right.
Do you have some additions, corrections?
I do. On page 4, agenda item 2, I'm just wondering, it says that CFAM was in agreement with the position taken by the California Association of Midwives in regards to physician consult requirements, but it doesn't say what CAM's position was, and I'm wondering if that actually had been stated so that we know what they were in agreement with.
There was no prior comment made prior to CFAM coming up and making that statement.
And CFAM themselves didn't say what that was. Okay, thank you.
Not during the meeting.
Okay, well, that's fine. All right. On page 7, the first paragraph, it doesn't look, my statement doesn't look correct to me. So if somebody else reads it differently, indicated that the patient would not need a consult because the CNM could determine that the patient was not a higher risk than if she never had had a cesarean. That doesn't make sense, and I'm wondering if I really said that or if you guys could look at it again.
We can review the webcast and determine if that needs a change.
I think that what I would have meant to say was that according to their law, the CNM was going to get notes back from the physician, and then she was going to determine whether the woman was at higher risk. But she didn't really need a consult to determine that in the first place because she is at higher risk. Period.
Maybe you just needed to put in not after could. Could
I
not
think
determine?
you were speaking to the way the law was written.
I was. Yeah. And that's why it...
And the determination was left up to the CNM. But
after
then,
the consult. She had to have a consult first. And then the CNM was going to review those records and determine if she was higher risk. And my thought on it was that she didn't need a consult to determine that because any woman who's had a prior cesarean is at slightly increased risk in the next pregnancy. So I might have said it that way, but reading it back, it doesn't make sense. So if you look at it, I'd appreciate it.
think what you were saying was that even if the consult came back that she was at higher risk, she could still determine that she was, even though at higher risk, acceptable for a home birth. I
That's
think
how
was the end result of the way the law was written. And I think you said then it doesn't make sense because she can determine if she's too high risk for a home birth or acceptable for a home birth in light of any condition. I think that, but specifically for this one, feedback.
Yeah.
The webcast will
Yeah,
clarify
I can figure that out. So do we have to then pend approval of the minutes to the next meeting, or?
We can review the webcast if you want to table the approval.
Or
That's
do you
up
want
to
it
you.
included is the question. The question should be more, do you want it included in the approval? Is it necessary?
I think it's necessary to be clear. If I really said that, fine, if that's verbatim what I said, but it doesn't make sense the
So
way
you
it is.
could have the minutes approved with any corrections as per the.
Okay, that works. So you're changing your,
Yeah, I would
Your
change the
motion.
motion to reflect that
okay.
with that mic that works. This one work?
Yeah.
This one is.
And then the second needs to approve the.
And the second
Okay, so
also-
I approve that.
I think the motion should be restated.
To approve the minutes as written, but with any additional corrections as viewed from the webcast.
Great, I second that.
Could we look at page 9 though too?
Could we clarify that with any correction based on the webcast or with a correction based on that specific
That's
That
item?
specific thing, yes.
But we're still we're still up in discussion on the minutes, if there are any additional corrections or additions.
Okay, what have you got, Diane?
I'm just wondering on page 9, fourth paragraph up from the bottom, last sentence added that on the positive side it was uniformed, and maybe it would be a way to move forward. Is that the word, uniformed?
We already verified that. We received an email from Tosi.
Okay.
That was the word that
That's-
was used,
okay.
and in the context, it was bringing everyone together, uniform, so that was
Okay.
the exact word
Okay,
used.
yeah.
If you want to change it.
No,
we
I
can-
just wondered. It didn't make sense to me, so I just wondered. It's fine.
Okay. Any other comments on the minutes? Okay. Is there any public comment on the minutes from our last meeting? All right, seeing none, Ms. Lowe, would you call the roll for a vote, please?
Dr. Adams,
Approve.
Ms. Dugan,
Approved.
Ms. Holzer,
Approved?
Ms. Marcelin,
Approved.
Ms. Yaroslavsky,
Approved.
Ms. Sparlon.
Approved. All right, so agenda item 4 is my chairperson report. And I was hoping that Kurt Warden would be here, but I don't see him. Is he not in the building at all today?
He's attending another meeting this afternoon.
Okay. I just wanted to acknowledge his participation and help as we have moved from being a little tiny committee of the medical board to being a full council, and it's been greatly appreciated. Mr. Warden is retiring at the end of this month, and I actually have a card for him. Maybe you can give it to him, Kim. So I just wanted to make that public acknowledgement. All right. And that's really all I have in terms of a report. I would like to take this time to mention that Ms. Marceline's term expires the end of June in 2017, and the announcement for the position will be sent fairly soon, and voting will occur at the March MAC meeting. And I believe Ms. Marceline said at the last meeting that she did not intend to reapply.
Correct.
Okay. Agenda item 5. Does anybody have any comments on my report?
No, it was excellent.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any public comment? No. All right. So agenda item 5 is an update on the continuing regulatory efforts required by Assembly Bill 1308. Ms. Webb, please.
Dr. Gonadev, who is the president of the medical board, has authorized the formation of a task force of physician board members to help work through some of the outstanding issues. And we are working on scheduling a meeting with the task force for early January. So right now, there's no further change to the regulations are still at an impasse. But I am hopeful that we'll have some more information about how we can move forward when we start meeting with the task force.
I just have a question. At our last meeting, Ms. Kirkmeyer, you said that staff would have to do some more investigation as to whether or not we could actually incorporate an informed consent into the regulation. I'm wondering if that happened.
An informed consent can be incorporated, but it is not possible that it overcome what is required by the statute as it's currently written. So you can't bypass a physician consult and sign off because you have an informed consent or waiver document by the patient, the way it's currently written.
Okay, I understand that. That makes total sense to me. What I guess my ask is do we have any authority if let's suppose we went forward and we said all prior C-sections were going to get a physician consult. Can we put into the regulation the format of the informed consent that a physician would also have to adhere to? Is that possible or not?
That's something your task force probably have to decide.
You can
I
think
mean,
about it and
yeah,
get back to us on it.
There's going to be some tension there with standard of care issues that are not put in writing.
Well, I was just thinking if we all crafted it together and ACOG was on board, that I know it's a long
But
shot.
there could be a form developed by the board that may help that could be incorporated into the regulations. It's just in the context of the discussion with, if the patient is given informed consent that despite the risk they want to go forward with a home birth,
That can't happen.
that can't bypass the physician consult and sign off.
I understand that. Okay. I'm just trying to figure out ways we can be creative.
I have a question too. Who all will be on the task force?
Dr. Sharon Levine and Dr. Michelle Bolot.
And would there be any, I guess there's no midwives or public on this task force?
The task force will meet with members of CAM and ACOG
Okay, thank you.
and Ms. Sparrow.
All right. Is there any other comment on this agenda item from the council? No. How about comment from the public?
Will this be publicly noticed?
The task force? Will the task force be publicly noticed?
Not this initial.
Not the first meeting.
Okay. All right. Any other comments? All right.
Rosanna Davis with CAM and CALM. Is the task force meeting scheduled yet? It's to be scheduled, is that right?
It's to be scheduled, yes.
Thanks.
I think we were looking at early part of the year, yes?
Kirkmeyer. Yes, we have dates to them at the first 2 weeks of January. We're waiting for them to get back to us with their availability at those dates. Okay, so it'll be the first or
The
second
two
week
doctors.
of January. The two doctors, yeah.
And will it be here in Sacramento or somewhere else?
Yes, Sacramento. So I think the most individuals are located here, so that'll be the easiest, them to come in.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other comments? All right. Seeing none, I'm going to move on to agenda item 6, an update on the midwifery assistant regulations. Ms. Webb.
The board staff, we have completed our part of the regs and it is now with Department of Consumer Affairs. They do a review that goes on to Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency for their review, and Division of Finance back to Department of Consumer Affairs, and back to the board for completion of the binder, so that it's submitted then to Office of Administrative Law for their review. So I know that it's frustrating that it's not quicker, but any new regulation is looked at with scrutiny and has to go through this very laborious, careful process. So it's going to be a few more months, and then regulations are enacted quarterly generally, but we did ask that once this is submitted to the Secretary of State, that it become effective upon submission.
Great. Thank you so much. Ms. Ehrlich?
Karen Ehrlich. The organization that you said, Ms. Webb, that is being, that this is being submitted to housing?
That's the umbrella agency above Department of Consumer Affairs. So
Oh.
it's Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency.
I didn't realize that Department of Consumer Affairs wasn't the top of the umbrella. Oh, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments? All right. Seeing none, we're going to move forward. Agenda item 7, update, discussion, and possible action on the licensed midwife annual report task force. Ms. Lowe.
So I will be providing a brief overview of the results of the survey that was sent out requesting feedback of licensed midwives on the reporting format of the LMAR. Before I get into the findings, I wanted to provide a little background on why the survey was sent out in the first place. Over the last couple of years, as many of you are aware, the need for edits to the current LMAR and the idea of reporting prospectively has been mentioned several times during MAC meetings over the years. Because of this, board staff began the process of reviewing the available options. Staff met with OSHPD to discuss updating the system to clarify the questions being asked and the availability to report prospectively versus accumulatively as it's done currently. During that meeting, it was discussed that all data, whichever way we ended up doing it, would have to be reported the same way. We couldn't have some reporting accumulatively and some prospectively. So before we made a decision, we felt that we needed to obtain feedback from all licensed midwives in California, which is why we sent that survey. So we sent the survey out at the end of October to approximately 400 licensed midwives, and to date we only received 91 responses, which is less than 25% of the licensing population. The main question that was being addressed on the survey was how the data should be reported, accumulatively or prospectively. If we were to move towards a reporting system that would allow data to be reported prospectively, the board's IT office would be taking on the task of creating a new program, and then once that was completed, would hand that off to OSHPD to maintain. However, if we were to stay with the current method of reporting, we would work with OSHPD to revise the current system. We could update the questions, we could update the format, and so on. Upon receipt of the surveys, I've reviewed all of the 91 that were submitted. 55 of those surveys indicated they would like to continue to report accumulatively. 26 came back prospectively, and 10 either marked both boxes or left it blank for that question. I reviewed all of the comments that were provided, and it appears that some midwives were concerned that moving to a prospective reporting tool would be too time-consuming. Others felt that reporting prospectively would allow for better data to be submitted. But nearly a third of all the surveys submitted requested moving towards using MANA for submitting the data. When I say a third of those, really what that comes down to, it's a third of a quarter of your midwife population, which is really only 6%. So keep that in mind. Regardless, The idea of moving towards MANA for reporting statistics has been discussed at great length during many MAC meetings, and the board has informed the MAC on more than one occasion that using MANA is not an option. We understand that many midwives currently utilize MANA for reporting, as well as other states for their data collection, but the board will not be moving forward in that direction. In 2014, AB 1308 did amend Section 2516 of the Business and Professions Code to include a section that allows the board, with input from the MAC, to adjust the data elements reported to better coordinate with other reporting systems, including MANA. It also encourages midwives to utilize systems such as MANA concurrently for better data tracking. The reason that we began looking into revising the LMAR was because it was determined that we needed to continue to use a system maintained by OSHPD. Because of this, again, our options are to revise the current system or to build a new one to allow the data to be reported prospectively and then hand it off to OSHPD. At this time, the MAC should be discussing whether they want to proceed based on the data that was received, or if further studies are needed, and if so, what other action could be taken in order to obtain a consensus on how the future reporting will look like.
Can I ask you, Natalie, please, for people that may not have been present for all of the discussions about why the board does not want to use MANA, could you just restate it for everybody, please?
The main reason, to my knowledge, is that it's because it is an organization, it's not a private organization, it's the Midwifery's association. It is their own association, so it's not a private individual organization.
I think that it could have been seen more that way 5 or 10 years ago. I would say now the National Association of Certified Professional Midwives is really the national organization for the professional credential. What is currently housed at MANA is the statistics and a national conference. There's not you couldn't say it's the same as the ACNM, for instance, or the same as ACOG in that regard anymore, I don't believe. So we might want to talk about that some more. Just saying. I have real reservations about creating a prospective data collection system that's going to be created by people that don't have the skills to really do that. I know that the MANA system has been perfected and revised over the years, and it was no easy chore. And I also know that when we created the Licensed Midwife Annual Reporting Tool, those of us who created it were not experts in creating such a thing, and that's why we have the problems with it that we have. So I'm personally reluctant to start over. I would much rather see us, if we're not going to move to MANA, to best as we can fix the tool that we currently have. Anybody else have comments?
Yeah. I mean, I was wondering if perhaps we could postpone it to gather more information. And what I would like to see the MAC do is schedule a presentation from the Washington State, it's not the Department of Health, the people who run the OB COPE, which is a quality measure program that happens between the midwives and the OB, between all OB providers in Washington State. And they are using MANA stats. They are combining all the hospital stats and the MANA stats together into one thing, and maybe get a presentation from the the staff of the state who are administrating that program to talk to us about how it's working in Washington and if there's problems with it being a midwifery association or not, because I think it's going very well, and I think it might be something that the board could hear as well, so that they can see how, in fact, this data can be used to an advantage, and it would be much less costly for California to adopt that rather than, it's not, there's going to be cost, but it's not going to be as much cost as creating a whole new system.
And I would also just again point out that of the results, the majority of the responses indicated to continue to report accumulatively.
I think that's because they didn't want a new, I don't know for sure, but I don't know that there's a way to parse out whether that was because they didn't want to use MANA or they didn't want the board to create a prospective tool.
Or because they already do MANA and they don't want to do two,
Exactly.
because that's a really, that is a
That's
burden. But I think what you're saying, Ms. Lowe, is that it's really the board that has the issue with using MANA stats. And so if we're having a presentation from another state that uses it in the way that we'd like to possibly see it here, then the presentation needs to be to the board, not
Yeah.
to the midwives. Most of us are fairly well convinced.
So I think that we all need to realize a little bit of what the pushback has been and why.
Thank you, Barbara.
Okay, so the issue is, for example, within the medical board, doctors that are licensed by the medical board would not be part of a reporting period to CMA. And just CMA is the professional organization by which doctors, it's their organization that represents them, they lobby for them, and they pay dues to them. They don't represent 100% of the doctors. They maybe represent 20, 35%, somewhere between 25 and 35%, but the state sees it as the official representative of the doctors, licensed doctors. So too, the issue is, what is CAM's relationship with, and how is it perceived as a relationship of midwives? And our midwifery community, I think, has been seen as interfaced, interlocked, interworking with MANA, because that's what has been the most smartest way of doing things, because they are the ones that have been able to take the documentation, take the information, and spit out what's necessary. OSHPD has been a rather difficult entity to work with because they've not been, this is not their thing that they're normally doing. I think, though, that on a go-forward basis, that unless there's some way of having OSHPD, who is the state official receptacle for data, so we have to understand they are the receptacle for all data for anything that's done within the state of California, for anything official. So unless there's a way for MANA to work with OSHPD, and for OSHPD to work with us, and for somehow for us to figure out what data is necessary, how to report it, how to use what's already being done anyway, I'm not sure how to make the state work, but I'm sure there's a way. They haven't figured out it either, but maybe they will. So that it's a possibility. I don't know how to go forward, but I'm going to tell you, if we're not going to be able to use MANA as the original source, or however it's called, original source, let's just call it original source, but it could be a secondary source, but it would have to bring OSHPD into they have to come into the picture. Is that kind of like, am I going the right place now?
I think what's been proposed in the past is that midwives would have their data collected by MANA and then be given a report that contained the data elements that were prescribed by law to give to OSHPD. So it would
But that's
be
not gonna
more of a
happen.
bookkeeping thing.
But as long as MANA is perceived to be the receptacle for information and run by, or what the interface is, that there's not a clean separation of responsibilities and oversight, so that there is no way that it can be doctored or it can be changed or manipulated. I'm not using that word only in the true sense just to move things around, massaged. It's maybe a better word. As long as that perception is not there, you're not going to go anywhere other than the wall is OSHPD. So as long as the wall is OSHPD and we have to make it work, and MANA is the one that you're giving your information to anyway, and you found to be the most effective and efficient, how to make the OSHPD and MANA, so you have to step back a little bit. OSHPD is still, the state is going to perceive MANA, unless there's a better explanation, that MANA is under the thumb of their profession. That's all. I think that's.
And if I can add to this, first of all, OSHPD has been very easy and well to work with, but they do have limitations. So it's not that we don't work well with them, we do. Let me clarify that. That's not only because they're here, but it is true. But they do have limitations, which when we started these discussions, that's where the board said, we're not going with MANA. but we will do what we can to build you a system that will work and meet your needs. We're not gonna build it ourselves. Obviously, we would want feedback from all interested parties, including OSHPD, and if we had representatives from MANA, and the MAC and the community. We have already basically got to the point where we have two options. We either accumulatively have the data collected or prospectively. Based on that decision, it's within the board to create a system that will work for you.
So I think that there needs to be somehow a group of this body to figure out what is the best way it should work, and that has to be done with staff. And then from there, some kind of a bridge operation of what is missing from the OSHPD, what OSHPD can and can't do. Can MANA be brought into OSHPD? Could MANA be a contractor with OSHPD? I don't know, I'm not here to make a business deal, okay? But there's gotta be some way so that midwives are not doing double and triple the work, exactly duplicative, that's a waste of time and energy. But do you want it prospectively or whatever you want it going forward? And I don't know what you want.
Well, and that's really what we need to figure out. That's the first step, and then we can figure out what options we have available and how we move forward.
So is there a way of doing an online to all of our licensed midwives, some kind of a survey monkey where they have to ask the question? I mean, you don't want to get to the point that you're not going to get your license renewed unless you do it, okay? But there are entities that do that. You don't fill out the forms, you don't get licensed. But
Yeah.
so the issue is, if that's the only thing you really need to know, that makes it important on a go-forward basis, how you're going to rearrange and reschedule and figure out this stuff. Is there a way of doing that and asking them as part of either the renewal of their license or their, it's Christmas, let's get with the season and be kind to everybody and make it happen? I don't know where to go with this.
So originally, we wanted to send this survey out by email.
Well, it's not working.
Quickly response, but we've been told many times that several midwives don't have access to the internet, they don't have email. So we said we will send a paper survey to every address that we have in our system, which is for every licensee. So we sent that back, we still only received 91, but of those 91 responses, there were 2 midwives that indicated that they did not have access to internet, and one of them said that it was intermittent. So 3 out of 91 that don't have access, I don't know if it's worth not emailing everyone.
Well,
I
you
don't
could
think
do-
it is.
You could do both. I mean, I don't know that they don't have internet because they live in a rural community, they don't have a public library. I mean, it's my understanding that all public libraries, and most of them, and county facilities have internet. So if there's a need to get to somewhere.
Right.
it's
Which
just-
I agree. The other issue or suggestion you brought up with renewals, I don't necessarily think that's gonna be the best route, being renewals are sent out based on your expiration date, so some people may not get this survey for 2 years. But we can look at doing additional outreach if that is the request of the MAC.
Well, I think there's 2 things that are clear. One is that prospective data collection is the gold standard if you're going to be using the data for any kind of research, period. That's the kind of data that is respected in the scientific community. So I think really what we need to ask ourselves is, why are we collecting the data? I mean, what do we want from this data? Do we want people to be able to do research from it, or do we just want the basics of how well are licensed midwives in California performing their job? And if we really just want to know how well we're performing our job, we can tweak the tool we have and have the answer without having to go through the effort of creating a prospective tool that many midwives are already using through MANA, and filling out the LMAR after you've done the MANA stats is not that difficult.
Do we have to go back to the legislature to change it?
Yes.
We do, yeah.
I have a question. I keep hearing prospective. Are we talking concurrent? If we're talking prospective, when we're talking about answering before it comes, we're talking about concurrent reporting.
We're talking about enrolling our client when they first present to care so that there's not an opportunity to leave their data out of the survey.
Wouldn't we, as California, want to be able to use this data for research, though? I know I'm not a midwife and I get that, but it seems to me that it's really important that people are informed about midwifery, and the more research we have in the state, I know that MANA is a big part of that too, but it sounds like that's not an option here.
I
Oxford
agree
doesn't
with
do
you,
research, do they?
and we do use the Elmar data. The problem with not collecting it in a very methodical, scientific way is that it can be called into question. That's the problem with it. And so, you know, being devil's advocate here, it can look really good on paper and not actually reflect the truth. Whereas you have a much better confidence that if you enroll your client when they enter care, you're not really going to be able to leave them out of your data set 6 months later after they've delivered and didn't have an optimal outcome. So we kind of have to weigh that, and I'm not sure that we have the resources necessary to create a prospective data collection system for this state.
Just for an example, looking at the statistics that we have collected, there's someone who had a uterine rupture, but we don't even know if that woman had a cesarean section or not, because they're not
You're right.
coordinated.
Right. But that we could fix.
Yes.
That we could easily fix.
And the other thing is the believability of data. In my experience, people don't look at data, they look at their own experience in the world, and they make decisions based on their emotional response. We've had studies back to the 1910s about midwifery care, and it doesn't seem to matter.
Good point.
Sure, but I think that on a go-forward basis, when you have to think about the professionalism of the occupation and the need for what is going to come down the pipeline as far as collaborative care models, as far as opportunities for insurance reimbursement, for all sorts of everything, you can't look at today and you can't look at yesterday, you have to look at tomorrow. We don't even know exactly what tomorrow's going to bring, but as professionally and as respectfully as possible to make things, you have to do it.
Oh, I'm not arguing against
I'm not arguing, period.
collecting the data or improving the system. I'm just saying that the outcome of data collection is less
Well, if
than
you don't-
optimal
Exactly,
in practice.
especially if you don't have the right information that you're asking for.
That could be
So
true.
what do you need?
For example, however, we look at the data that we've collected on VBACs over the last, how long have we had that, Elmar? And has it
7
made
years.
any difference at all in
Our
the
negotiating
kind of
power?
response we're getting on the regulatory side?
Right.
Not really. I'm disappointed.
Hi, Karen Ehrlich. I would like to speak about the benefit of the prospective, also having to do with the fact that the way the data have been collected, especially in the first couple of years, and I know it's better than then, but it still carries the potential for being really problematic, is that sometimes stuff comes in that's clearly wrong, but it isn't noticed because there's no double check, there's no way of balancing it against what was prospectively entered. And we had a couple of results that came in the first years of the annual report that were inflammatory and alarming and incorrect. And I don't think we're going to be able to fix that with the tool that we have, even with it being revised. We're going to improve it, but I don't think we're going to fix it necessarily. So I have been speaking on this council for many years about doing this prospectively, and I will repeat that. I think it needs to be prospective.
And I also want to remind everyone that I want to say it was March of 2015, we held an interested parties meeting here at the board to discuss the LMAR. And during that meeting, I thought it was very successful on all of the feedback that we had. And with that feedback, it was discussed that with the system that would be created or revised, there would be, it wouldn't just be fill in this box, go to the next question, go to the next question. It would prompt you. If you answered yes to one question, it would ask you 3 more questions. And so that the data that was compiled at the end of your report would be more accurate than what you are currently reporting. So it's not that we're just going to change the questions if we were to revise the current version. It's that we would be creating a system that would ultimately get you the correct data in the right spots.
Is there a budget to do it right? Do we have a budget that would?
Yes, we have staff that can do it, build the system behind it. That's what I want to let you know, is that Carrie keeps bringing up that she has concerns about it being put together. However, we have an IT shop that would be put into their already prioritized items, but it's something that our staff has looked at and believe they can build. So I'm not concerned about the building of it whatsoever. I am concerned, though, that you have a large group of midwives who have said they don't want it to be prospective. And while you have those of you who know how important that is, I think you do have to give some merit to the survey that has been provided, because not everybody does MANA. It's not required. And so those of you that do MANA, you understand the importance of the prospective and how easier probably in the long run it is to gather that information, but not all of your cohorts and your peers are in that same field. So I think you do have to give some deference to the survey that's been provided. From our perspective, we can do either. We can make the changes. I do think, Natalie's right. There were great changes. That was one of the best meetings we've had to put stuff together. And I think no matter what, it's going to be a better system, whether we do it prospectively and gather the information that way, or whether we keep it with just the way it is and make the improvements that we said, because there is going to be a lot better check and balance that they've never had. Because Ms. Ehrlich is right. It's always been kind of like, well, how could this be, but yet this was here? How could this number be this one and this not? So definitely we need to make changes, but I do think you have to kind of consider that when you're looking at how you want us to move forward. And the second thing with MANA, the one thing is, I'm just going to be very frank. When people look at data and it's provided by an association rather than coming to a state entity, that there is no availability for outside interests, that data is going to be given more validity than it's coming from the association. If we were wanting to look at data and it was coming from, just like Ms. Jaroslawski said, from the California Medical Association for Physicians versus what's actually being reported. Now granted, it's self-reported, but at the end of the day, the data that's coming from a state agency that can't be manipulated and that goes directly into a portal from what's reported is going to be looked at as more of a validity. But at the same time, I'm not saying that MANA is not a good reporting tool and shouldn't be also looked at. It's another source of information regarding licensed midwives. But it's two very different things. You have a state-run, state-organized one going straight from OSHPAD, who is the data collector for the state, versus one that is not. The one thing the legislation did say, though, is that we could look at more of the things that are in MANA to make sure that they're the same way it is reported with us. And I don't know if when we looked at that and we had that interested parties meeting, I don't know if we were looking at, is this the same data that has to be reported to MANA? And I know if it's prospective, it's not as easy maybe to look at that, but maybe that's what we look at as well. But I think we had a pretty good idea of where we were going.
And I just want to say for the record, I'm not concerned about the IT end of it as much as I'm concerned about the epidemiological end of it. And having somebody helping to create it who understands epidemiology and can speak to that as it's going forward. Because I think that's really what we were lacking in the first place. And maybe we wouldn't have had the problems with the way we asked the questions if there'd been somebody helping us that understood the way to ask the questions. So no, I have perfect confidence in the tech people to actually write the program to get us the answers we've asked them to get us. It's just, are we asking the questions properly?
Well,
That's
maybe
the piece I want to understand.
Maybe that's where we can bring in maybe somebody from, we have a really good relationship with UCSF that helps us, with doing research and things like that, or UCD. Maybe we can reach out to some of them on that aspect of it. It's going to slow us down in getting it changed, but maybe that's something we can do if we decide, first of all, how we're going to do it.
I have a question, and I don't know, I think it's an IT question, but if the data is collected prospectively and a woman is entered into the system, there is similar data to what's being collected here in the department that does birth certificates. a lot of that information. So if a woman's name is there, whether the midwife completes what she's supposed to do or not, there is data there. Was it a home birth? Was it a C-section? What were some complications? Could there be an interface between the systems where some of that information can be pulled out so that there is automatic input into some of those fields? There's many of the questions that are being asked. Is that something that can be developed?
I think by the, oh,
The patient name is blinded. We don't report the patient's name anywhere.
Do you report
We're not required to.
Social Security or
No,
anything?
no identifying numbers for the woman. And the midwives' identifying numbers don't come back to the board. So the board has no way to know which midwives reported which statistics. They just get an aggregate of all of our data.
and if you're
Does
doing it prospectively, the other thing is by the time you got to your birth certificate and filling that out, you would have had to have already entered all of that information into the system so you could track it, because at the time of the birth, it's then you're at the end of your prospective response, right, Carrie? That would, yeah.
Well, what I'm speaking to though is those if you're filling in the information prospectively, and there are a number who don't want to do it, if I know I can enter the name and there's still debt.
I see what you're saying.
Not
The
if I know
split
as person
yeah.
who's supposed to be doing it, but if I don't do it, there's still information that can be extracted out of that. So does it need to be blinded, the name? If it's a state system, does it need to be blinded, or can it be blinded once it's in there so that when the data comes out, there's no name associated, but as it's being collected, there is identifying information?
And OSHPD may want to discuss this, but from what I recall, OSHPD's not able to maintain any personal confidential information, so it could not go into their system at all.
Because it
I
goes
also
to
think you'd
OSHPD
have
before
a
it comes to
pretty
us.
big pushback from consumers if we wanted to do
And I
that.
don't really think that actually would even be legal, because providing patient information here, then breaching your patient confidentiality, even if it was coming to us, because we can't just go gather medical records for John Doe. We have to have their authorization to do that, so.
And even for Manistats, even though the client's name isn't part of it, they have to give their consent to be part of the study.
So I have two issues. One is that there may be a need to figure out a way to do better outreach, better education. We maybe need to take a look at the associations that midwives do belong to, the communities they belong to, and they need to understand that there's a survey coming and the importance of that survey and what it means to the future of the profession. That maybe, I mean, I understand people get busy. I understand there's no time to do anything, but maybe if they understood that within the first week of such and such a time this was coming, maybe we just need to do better. And we all need to take personal, not staff. I'm looking at those people that deal with the profession. That's number one. And number two is maybe there is a way for it to do with OSHPD, with those people that you know what you need, you know what kind of data you need, information you need to take away, that maybe there's a way of sitting down with men and saying, how is it you do this? And maybe somehow, I don't understand how the system works, but maybe there's a way of collaborating so that we can do this finally, because it seems that every couple of years we worked on it from scratch, it's gotten this far, maybe we need to evaluate if it's not working, why not, what can we make it better, instead of sitting around chewing it over and mulling it over, instead sit down and just do it.
Well, which is what we did at the interested parties meeting.
Right. I just had a thought in terms of getting a better, more comprehensive survey. I'm guessing it's probably not possible, but what if we tacked it on to the Elmar report for this year, and they couldn't submit the report until they filled out the survey?
Oh.
Is
there a way to do that?
That's better than a fine, that's good, that's good.
We could. I mean, we'd have to say it was optional, because we can't require them to do it, because the law doesn't authorize us to require them to fill out this part of the survey. But as we've seen from our physician survey, those optional questions usually get answered if you tack them on to what is mandatory. So we could definitely do that, and then kind of put this off until we get the next step.
Yeah, and then
they're coming up in March, right?
Coming up in March, so then that would push it to our August
Right.
meeting. But we could have an interested parties meeting after we got that data in like May or something, and
Yeah.
kind of get together and see really what people were seeing, or you could even send us something via email or. But I would like to see us do another interested parties meeting on this to get more input in terms of what our resources are for fixing or starting over.
Let's not start over.
I really think I hate to keep dragging this out, because I think we're there already. I mean, if you want to have another interested parties meeting to change what we did last time and what we thought should be requested, or if you want to do it prospectively and do that, I don't think there's a need for another interested parties meeting at this point.
If we do tack a survey onto the Elmar, could I please consult in terms of what the questions are? Yeah.
And we will have to follow up with OSHPD and make sure that we can get this.
They're shaking their
Me
heads
too.
yes back there.
It doesn't count, it's not on the record, it does not count.
So we'll follow up, and if we're able to
Okay.
do that, we can work
Uh-oh,
with you
here
to
she
get a
is.
survey.
It's okay, it's okay, we gotta be on the record.
Hi, I'm Robin Strong from OSHPD, and we are really close to the end of the year. It's December 1st, and we are loading the licensee data into our database, ready to open the report in the new year in the next 2 weeks. So this is a pretty late ask for programming changes, and so I don't know what kind of technical resources would be required to integrate that into a requirement for filing the report.
Yeah, me
So
either.
I can't make any promises. This is a pretty late ask, especially since we don't have requirements to give to our technical folks at this
Well,
point.
If it has to be optional anyway, could there just be a link to a SurveyMonkey survey? That would be easy, right? You could do that.
Which we could talk further after this
Okay, well, if you
meeting.
can make it happen, that would be great.
Sounds good.
And if we can, we will.
Okay, so what I need to know, Ms. Lowe, is what do you need from us to go forward? Do you need a motion? What do you need?
I would think that we would just need a recommendation to proceed with obtaining more research on what the midwives are looking for. So
Okay,
I don't need anything official.
so moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Any comment? Questions from the audience?
Sure, Mr. Ackerman has
What,
something.
what is the motion?
The motion is to go forward and gather more information about what the midwives want in a go-forward way.
So attempt additional outreach.
Yes.
So that can include
It could include a survey attached to the Elmar.
email, written
Email,
correspondence.
You guys can write letters in your, notices in your journals, whatever,
Yeah, I think that was done, but go ahead.
I'm Katie Bueller. I'm a licensed midwife. For me, the restriction of by the time I opened the envelope, Ms. Lowe, and I was just late getting the envelope open. I was really interested in it, and then I had to either fax it or mail it, and the fax was not possible for me, and the mail wasn't going to make it by the 18th. So for me, like the email or the online option was kind of
Much
what I was
better.
expecting. It would be very helpful, I think, to get our midwives to submit the surveys.
Bruce, did you still want to say something?
Bruce Ackerman, and I've spoken with you before. I do work with MANA, with the Division of Research, and one thing I wanted to say, I realize that there's a lot of confusion about what MANA is. I concur with what Ms. Barabon said, that changes within the midwifery world have, over the last few years, sort of moved most of the advocacy and lobbying efforts into other organizations, and MANA is kind of an umbrella organization. At this point, one of the main things that MANA does is to maintain its division of research. The other thing I would point out as far as that goes is that the division of research is pretty independent from MANA. So the division of research is run by a coordinating council, of which I'm a member. Most of the members of the coordinating council are university researchers. And the coordinating council operates pretty much independently from the MANA board. So other than getting fiscal support and conference support, pretty much the Division of Research is able to make decisions on the basis of research considerations, which is what we do. So I really I can't see a better, and then to go over to the OSPED side, and this is with absolutely all respect to the people from OSPED who have worked very hard on this project, but OSPED is limited legislatively. As I understand the legislation, the current law says that the data goes into OSPED, and then, as was mentioned, the only thing that comes out of OSPED is a summary report that goes to the medical board. I think the medical board receives a report that says what the overall statistics were, summary, and then also a list of the midwives who complied or didn't comply. Or maybe only the number of midwives who complied and didn't comply, but in any case, that's it. There's no way to go back and say, gee, this is a curious result. I wonder what happened here, because that's inside OSPED, and legislatively, nobody can access it. OSPED is not allowed to divulge it. So it's not a matter of anybody's, how hard they work or how much, what their background is, how much they know. It's a matter of the legislation actually prohibits this from being used in any other way than producing this report. I just want to point out that that is a really inefficient thing to do with hundreds of midwives' time, with your time, with all of the time of the people in this room, and all the money being spent to do the programming and all of that. It all produces, out of all of that work, one report, which allows the medical board to say, well, gee, the midwives don't seem to be too off track. Okay, everything seems to be fine, and that's about it. There's nothing else that can be done. Whereas if you have a data set that is actually an open data set, which Manastats is, it's an open data set that researchers can apply to, and that's what it's used for. University researchers apply. There are at any given point 3 or 4 applications being processed. Right now, as I speak, there are 3 or 4 applications being processed. There's never been an application denied. There might be in the future, but it would only be because the applicant didn't have a study design that made sense, or didn't have the qualifications to do the study, or the study they wanted to do just wasn't possible within the data set. But people apply for data, and they access the data, and they do research. And then the Commissioner Holzer mentioned the collaboration that we're doing with the OB COPE, which is Obstetrics Clinical Outcome Assessment Program in Washington State. That is basically a QI program, quality improvement, for all obstetric providers. And the OB COPE people came to the Midwives Association of Washington State, MAWS, and asked them to allow for MAWS to be a collection site, just like a hospital.
Getting off track
is a
of the
collection
agenda
site.
item.
We need
Okay. But anyway, that's an example of a QI process, and that's another benefit of the data. So I think what we want to work toward is for data collection to have as many values as possible, as many benefits to consumers ultimately by providing better care, to the profession, to the medical board for being able to provide oversight, all the values for research to understand about birth, understand about care, all the different things that can come out of data collection, because it's a lot of work to collect these data. So,
Bruce?
Thank you.
Bruce, are you
Yes.
suggesting then that really we need a legislative fix because the LMAR is not designed to do what we've been discussing it could do? It's only designed to give a report of a few numbers to the medical board and nothing else?
well,
Because if it's only designed to do that, and we're spending all this time and money on a annual report that doesn't do what we want, then do we need some different law that requires something different? Because quality assurance isn't really what the outcome
It's designed
of
for,
our
right.
LMAR is.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
we have to look at what are the goals of collecting this, and if you've pointed out that it's meeting its goals so far, but it's not the goal that most of us would like to see research do.
I think that there are a lot of really good sidebars here, and I think that maybe it's time for the state midwifery organizations and consumer groups to re-examine whether the LMAR is doing the work that is helpful to consumers and the public in general. And if it's not, then it's up to those organizations to look to a legislative fix for that. This body can't really do that. So I want to, unless somebody has something more to say about how the motion that's on the table,
Well,
I want to go ahead and move forward.
try to answer Ms. Marceline's question, I would say there's several different approaches, and with regard to the specific topic right now of surveying the licensed midwives, the survey that was sent sounds like, I didn't see the survey and certainly didn't take it, but it sounds like it's kind of like asking someone whether you want a red car or a car with no wheels. You know, well, if you want a blue car, it's not a good choice because, of course, you want a car with wheels, but, you know, what are you going to do? And so a prospective system within the confines of the way the LMAR is set up right now, where that essentially means midwives are going to have to do two completely separate systems. And the one that is required by state, or they don't have to, they can drop out of manistats or not do them. But the one that the state is operating wouldn't have any other of these values, as I was saying earlier. And so maybe people don't like that approach, but that doesn't necessarily mean that midwife doesn't think that prospective data collection is a value. It's just that the options presented don't allow it to be practical. So I think maybe you should consider several different options.
Please conclude.
And try to
need to finish.
clarify what they are and see what results you get from that.
I think
Thank you.
that the proposal that's on the table is to go forward with more data collection, and Ms. Lowe and myself are going to work on crafting those questions. Is that everybody's understanding?
Yes.
All right. Any more comments on that particular?
Yeah, I guess my only question is, why did we put the LMAR in there in the first place?
Talk to Faith. I can't answer that for you, even
Right,
though I was
but-
at that table, but I don't
It's
know.
because the
But-
medical
but
board
wait,
didn't
wait,
believe
wait.
that midwifery care was safe, and we said we would prove it was, and if we could prove it was, then we could get our law passed.
Right,
All that
but
stuff.
that's
Yeah,
not really
no,
happening.
because it came way after that. So we're really digressing, and we need to move forward. So
It's not a digression, Carrie, we're discussing the LMAR.
Well, it's why we have it in the first place is a digression to the motion that's on the table.
Yeah, that is.
That's what I'm saying. So
But I think it is because if the motion on the table isn't addressing the reason that we have it in the first place, then our survey, I don't know, I'm not saying this the way I want to.
I think I understand your frustration. I'm trying to work within the confines of what this council can do, and this council can't change the legislation. All we can do is try to figure out, do the midwives in this state want to go to a prospective data collection system that the medical board designs and implements, or do they want to stay with the current system with changes in the questions to better gather the data? And that's really all this body can vote on.
Right, but if that happens, we have to change the legislation. So we're happy to change legislation regardless. So
Yeah,
if we
but
want to
it's
change
not
that,
this body that will
that
be
legislation
changing it.
rather than
I
that
guess
legislation,
What
it's
I'm
just
trying to
same.
say, Carrie, is that if going to a prospective data collection system is more work, more money, and still the same results that we get now because it's all locked up in OSHPD and we can't access individual features of it, then why do it?
And when you get the survey, say no.
What? Then
You
I
get
could
the
fill out my
survey
survey
and
say
say
no.
you don't want prospective data collection
No,
for these reasons.
I want prospective data collection. I just don't think in the form of the current legislation that it's going to do any good.
Then what needs to happen is you need to work with your state organization to get the law changed.
So here's what can happen right now.
Thank you.
There's a motion on the table that's been seconded. People have commented on it, and Ms. Barravon can call the vote. If it doesn't pass, to continue further outreach, you can suggest not taking any further action. It remains as it is right now, and individuals can lobby the legislature to change the law. So you can call the vote for an up or down, and then move forward from there.
Thank you. Ms. Lowe?
Dr. Adams.
Can you please clarify what I'm voting on?
So the motion is to recommend staff proceed with providing additional outreach.
And a survey that you and I are going to craft the language of.
Okay, I vote yes.
Including survey.
Ms. Lowe said she only needed a recommendation, but a motion was made and seconded, despite what she said. And so,
was just making a recommendation to go forward.
so whoever made the motion can withdraw it.
Yeah, I'll withdraw the motion.
Okay.
I apologize, I thought it was just a recommendation that we were talking about.
Okay. So the recommendation then is,
So you didn't need to vote.
you and I are going to get together and we're going to create a survey with questions that will,
Right, you
Get
don't,
us-
yes.
the data we need.
All right, and does the person who seconded the motion
me.
agree to that? Okay.
Yes, I agree. All right.
Moving on the agenda.
Moving forward. Didn't expect that one to be that interesting. All right. Agenda item number 8 is a program update. Ms. Lowe, please.
Sorry, I'm taking one note here. Okay, so before we get into the discussion on the statistics, I wanted to bring to your attention an issue that was brought to the board's attention, which is that some midwives may be providing peer review with lay individuals practicing midwifery. This act of providing peer review to an unlicensed or lay person could be viewed as aiding and abetting the unlicensed practice of midwifery, which is grounds for disciplinary action pursuant to Business and Professions Code Section 2519E. So,
Can you say that again? Sorry.
so there was an issue that was brought to the board's attention that licensed midwives are providing peer review to unlicensed or lay individuals regarding the practice of midwifery.
Oh, you mean so that there would be unlicensed people in the circle of peer review? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
In the peer reviews?
And
in
there
the
may be
meetings?
additional elements to this, but the main focus was peer review.
Okay.
So for the integrity of the practice of midwifery in California, for your licenses, and most importantly, consumer protection, the board would like to request that licensed midwives report those individuals to the board. Board staff will be providing additional outreach to licensed midwives regarding this matter to ensure that the midwives are aware of this issue. I don't have any additional information to provide, but wanted to bring it to the midwifery community that this is an act that could be considered aiding and abetting unlicensed practice.
Can I just ask for a point of clarification? You're talking about having a group for peer review where one or more of the midwives in the peer review is not a student, but is an unlicensed person providing true midwifery care and is peer reviewing her cases with that group.
To my knowledge, yes, that is what
That's
this is
your
regarding.
understanding. Okay, thank you.
Does this also include CNMs since they're not LMs?
They're licensed, so no.
Okay.
Okay, so again, we're gonna be providing outreach. So
You're
I'm
gonna
probably
send a
sending
letter or
out
something?
explaining it a little bit more.
Thank you.
So now I'll move on. Pretty briefly, the licensing statistics were provided on page 15 of your packets. There's nothing really that stands out too much. If anyone has any questions of the statistics, I can help answer them. If not, I'm just going to move along to the hospital reporting forms on the next page. Are there any questions on licensing? Okay. So page 16 of your packets are the hospital transfer reporting forms. As you can see, the first quarter of the fiscal year, we received 61 reports for licensed midwives for transfers. I think it's interesting to note that 61 is basically 45% of the total number that we received last year. So we are starting to see more reports come in, which is a good thing, because transfers are not a bad thing to a hospital, but they do need to be reported to the board. So hopefully those numbers will continue to rise. And then down the road, once that form is eventually revised, then more outreach will be done. But this is a good sign so far.
I'd like to ask that when you do the Elmar report, at whatever MAC meeting that is, probably August, that you correlate, if you can, the number of transfers to hospital with the number of forms you got.
And we did mention that in our update in August, and
Okay.
we'll do that again next year.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to page 17 of your packets, which are the enforcement statistics. During the last quarter, the board received 16 new complaints. 7 of those were for licensed midwives and 9 were for unlicensed individuals. And there were no referrals for disciplinary or criminal actions. Are there any questions?
Does that mean 9 different individuals or 9 complaints? It could be the same
It
midwife.
could be the same, or it could be 9 individual. That information is not available.
I see that the number of investigations currently open, total of 15. So there were 16 referrals and 15 of those cases are still open.
Investigations currently open could be from complaints that were forwarded during a different quarter or different fiscal quarter. So you can't necessarily correlate those
I
numbers.
don't see
one-to-one.
15. Where are we seeing 15?
And between the licensed and
licensed and 8
non-licensed.
under unlicensed.
For complaints or investigations currently open, for licensed is 7, unlicensed is 8, for a total of 15 currently open.
Okay, I see it.
So I'd be very careful about mixing the two numbers, okay? Because it becomes then a number of 15. And it's not a number of 15, it's a number of licensed midwives versus unlicensed midwives. And the numbers, when you start to combine them, don't look good for the numbers on reports. So be
For license.
No, yeah,
be careful
I
about
just-
the conversation here.
Well, she said there were a total of 17
But that's
reports.
not, I'm not,
Yeah.
my comments are directed to Ms. Lowe specifically.
There was a total, I just mentioned the individual complaints received,
So I would
and then I did the
caution us
breakdown.
all to take a look at this, and when we do it, to
And maybe do it separately.
They're totally two different entities.
Because it's really,
It is broken down separately in the packets, and I
But when you're
indicated that there.
reporting it to us, please just keep it.
just remember people on the webcast can't see it.
Okay,
They don't see that there's
That
2
number
tables
becomes
there.
a number in people's heads versus the reality of what licensed midwives are involved. So I just want to be careful about.
Thank you, Barbara.
okay. If there are no further questions, we're going to move on to item C of the agenda item, which is on page 18 of your packets. Hopefully this will be a very brief update here. At the last MAC meeting, when we presented the report or the results of the 2015 LMAR, the summary, it was brought up that it would be nice to see a side-by-side comparison of previous year's data. So the board staff, Anne Marie, she has compiled all of the data from the last report in 2015 back to 2011. Each section is included except the breakdown by county, because that data to compile year by year would be not viewable, reasonable. So I don't really want to discuss the data here because we've already discussed it each year, but I wanted to provide you an opportunity to review the report. If you have any questions on how it is formatted, or we've missed something that you are expecting to see, we would like to hear that. You don't have to say it at today's meeting necessarily, but you will start seeing this at the in August each year when we report the LMAR. But
It's great. Thank you.
Super. Thank you so much. I did have one question on Part B. Is there written somewhere that's accessible to consumers the process for following a complaint through? Like the board receives the complaint and then what happens? What's the process to either deciding it has no merit or taking it ahead to investigation?
I believe there is a brochure on our website called How Complaints Are Handled. And I'm sure there's additional information also on our website under the Consumers tab.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. If there are no other questions, that concludes my update.
Thank you. Any comment from the public? From members of the MAC? All right. Seeing none, we're going to go forward. Agenda item 9 is a report from the California Association of Licensed Midwives on the new quality care program by Rosanna Davis. I need to move so I can see it.
It's right here, it's right here in your packet.
Oh, okay, where? Under 9?
Should turn this on earlier.
Thank you.
Is it on? Okay.
Pardon me? Oh, is there a mic I can hold,
We
or
can-
should I sit here?
Oh, we disconnected it, huh? Yeah, you're connected.
Okay.
Sorry. Did it come up? Am I not getting a picture?
So the majority of people have it in their packets.
This
So
slide,
it's on
yes.
Page 26.
Oh, I need a cable. What's this cable? Oh, there we go. But why is it not? Do you want me to turn the lights? Yeah.
Good afternoon. I'm Rosanna Davis, licensed midwife from the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm also president of both California Association of Midwives and the newly formed California Association of Licensed Midwives. Today, I'm here to present about a quality care initiative for California licensed midwives. The goal of such a quality care program will be to define and improve quality care with licensed midwives, support licensed midwives in providing quality care, document and research licensed midwifery care to identify areas for improvement, and most importantly, improve collaboration with hospital and medical providers in order to facilitate access to higher levels of care in the interest of safety and quality for California families. Before I continue, I want to make sure that you are all up to date on changes with the organization of California Association of Midwives this year. Recently, CAM grew into two organizations. CAM gave birth to California Association of Licensed Midwives this year. This organizational change was to secure and strengthen our capacity to support both California families and the profession of licensed midwives. CAM and CALM operate in tandem. They have some overlap of function and mission, as well as distinct purpose and reasons for being. CAM serves California families to increase access to all providers in all settings, with a growing emphasis on bridging racial, social, cultural barriers to safe, affordable, competent maternity care. CAM, therefore, is a public benefit organization and an educational foundation. Its corporate structure is a 501c3 charity. CALM, or California Association of Licensed Midwives, you have to like that acronym, is a dedicated professional organization for California licensed midwives. Its corporate structure is 501c6, and it's a member organization comprised of licensed midwives. CALM also takes great interest in patient autonomy of decision-making, access to safe care, but it is also now the legislative and policy advocate for California licensed midwives. From here on out, I'm going to have CALM take the lead in this quality assurance program presentation. However, keep in mind that CAM still plays an important role because of the public benefit of a statewide quality care initiative. CAM and CALM are partners in this, in all of their endeavors. They are not competing interests. So why a quality care program? And while I speak of quality care program, please keep in mind that I use interchangeably quality care program, quality improvement, quality assurance, but why a quality care program? Well, there's always room for improvement, and through an organized initiative, we can make those improvements based on data collection, collaboration, accountability measures, and education. But why else? Because a lack of integration, which can be viewed as barriers to collaboration, it undermines safety and quality. The research shows this, and midwives, doctors, and patients experience that undermining of the quality and safety. We can continue to initiate legislative and policy changes, but we also can't wait. There's much that we can do through our professional organizations. So when I talk about integration, what does that mean? Integration, and why is it relevant to a conversation about quality care? Integration in general is not something that midwives in California have currently into the healthcare system. It took a change in our statute to remove physician supervision so that we were clearly functioning in our scope of practice. But what integration can mean going forward is that families experience seamless access to appropriate level of care to meet their health and medical needs. Most of you here may be familiar with ACOG's obstetric care consensus from February 2015. It defines levels of maternity care and advocates for seamless access to higher levels of care as necessary. It's a very important paper. It does acknowledge midwives as primary care providers. What it doesn't do is acknowledge that home birth is a level of care. It does talk about birth centers as a level of care. But most of us here understand that there's not much difference between the care that's provided in the home and a birth center. For families receiving care with licensed midwives, there continue to be barriers to access of higher levels of care, and therefore we function in a system that undermines quality and safety. There is a system failure, I want to point that out, that needs to be remedied. That system failure will be fixed when midwives and physicians can better collaborate for their patients and for higher levels of care when needed. So how is integration related to quality and safety? The studies show that the integration of midwives and collaboration with physicians, the outcomes are comparable. We've seen that from a study from the Netherlands, where they compared low-risk pregnancies by place of birth. They found that planning a home birth does not increase risks of perinatal mortality or severe perinatal morbidity among low-risk women, provided the maternity care system facilitates this choice through the availability of well-trained midwives and through a good transportation and referral system. They've shown the same thing in British Columbia as well as in the UK. For anyone, I have the citations for you if you want to take them home with you. I printed them out. Here in California, though, we have inconsistency of a good transportation and referral system. We have inconsistency of collaboration between midwives and physicians for the sake of patient safety. That inconsistency is not a failing of midwives and their care. It is a system failure. Earlier this year, Cam did a survey, and I think you remember me coming in and reporting about that. That survey was to learn more about what was happening around the state. We learned that in some places, integration and collaboration was happening fairly effectively. As an example, earlier this year, I took a first-time mom to the hospital whose labor had arrested at home after many hours. The local hospital, when she was admitted, she was able to push her baby out without complication. We had transferred because there were what we call pink flags. Her labor was not progressing. We were in a rural location. Her contractions had spread out. There were just too many things that made it wise to go to the hospital. We did transfer to a hospital where they're very familiar with midwives and home birth. They go out of their way to say to the patient, sorry, you had to change your plans. What can we do to accommodate you and your baby now? I gave my report to the doctor directly, as is required of us. After requesting a call back from the physician, he did in fact call. And when I gave my report to the doctor directly, the nurse subsequently came in with her transfer form for the medical board. Everything went seamlessly. However, that's not what's going on everywhere, and everyone deserves to have that kind of quality care and access. For instance, in this other situation, in another part of the state, the client called her midwife to report that she was in early labor. The partner, whose first wife had had 2 kids at home, reported that there was much bleeding, and he thought it wasn't normal. So the midwife instructed the client to put on a pad which filled with blood in several minutes, and a subsequent photo of the situation. It was clear that there was excessive bleeding going on. The midwife directed them to go straight to the hospital, which was 5 minutes from their home. The midwife called ahead to the hospital, informed the charge nurse of the situation, and recommended that they be ready for a C-section because the midwife's assessment of the situation, there was probably a partial or abruption going on. However, when the midwife met the couple at the hospital and found them in triage, the woman was laboring without a fetal monitor and in a puddle of blood that was half of a liter already. It was 40 minutes until the nurse was made an assessment, put on a fetal monitor, and that was only after the midwife had asked several times that the nurse come in and make an assessment and get a fetal monitor on. The nurse's assessment that it was heavy bloody show and that it was normal. The doctor didn't do a direct assessment until 2 hours after the admission. During the midwife's report eventually to the doctor made comments to the midwife during the report. You know, she detailed GBS status, the baby was vertex, and each time the doctor said, "How do you know that?" And the midwife answered through direct assessment, through testing. After a few hours, Pitocin was started, and eventually fetal distress set in, and there was a crash C-section approximately 6 hours after admission. The APGARs were 3, 7, and 8. A partial abruption was confirmed. Estimated interpartum blood loss was 1 liter. So a little bit of what can happen when communication is poor, people don't understand their roles, and this idea that everyone needs to have access to higher levels of care when it's needed. So our goal with the quality care program is safety for all families receiving licensed midwife care. So the 4 pillars of this proposed program are data collection and research, professional collaboration, professional clinical guidelines and accountability measures. In the development of this plan, we've studied what others are doing in Washington, Oregon, and New York State. We've also looked at medical models of quality improvement, such as described in Quint Studer's book, Hardwiring Excellence.
Say that again?
Hardwiring Excellence, Quentin Studer. So speaking of data collection and research, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, and we can't get no respect. There are no perfect answers to our data collection currently. We are encouraging all midwives to participate in MANA, as well as submit their LMAR in a timely way. We're trying to make inroads as well with the Department of, and when I say we, I mean our professional association in collaboration with Susan Jenkins, our attorney. We're trying to get re-implemented the field for planned place of birth in the birth certificates. This will improve quality of birth certificate data for out-of-hospital birth. So I would like to encourage us all to keep thinking innovatively about how we can get better data collection, including better participation of the licensed midwives, to point to our great outcomes, but also to examine and subsequently measure where we can make improvements. The Calm Quality Care Program will also have its own data set. Actually, we've already set that up through MANA. So any Calm members and quality care participants will have their own MANA data set. We plan to have a webinar and newsletter items to motivate participation both in MANA, but also to understand some of the survey questions that will be going out from the MAC and the medical board staff. Quality care depends on professional collaboration. We all want to pull in the same direction. That's easier when we acknowledge we all want the same thing, quality and safety. We can't seem to legislate collaboration because of competing interests. I'm not ruling out that possibility, but we can still be moving forward as a profession. How can we do that? Well, it starts with education and dialogue and building professional relationships. Many OBs and nurses don't know what our scope of practice is, and if we don't tell them, no one else will. We also don't know sometimes what they need from us that might be missing currently if we don't ask them. So we'll do it one hospital at a time. We're currently creating an interactive workshop for hospital providers. The goal of the workshop is creating better collaboration and guidelines for transfers. We call the overall project Calm Transitions. It's a statewide program to facilitate safe, collaborative transfers of maternity and newborn care from the community to the hospital. We, of course, will look at work already done by Home Birth Summit and their best practice guidelines so that we are not reinventing what is already good stuff. Another important aspect of the Calm QA program is clinical guidelines. Plan is to currently adopt what we already have, which the clinical guidelines that are posted on the medical board website. But if we own them as a profession, we can update them and expand them as evidence arises that it's appropriate to change them. That way we won't need to make legislative changes to amend them and keep them up to date. Any good quality care program has accountability measures. The elements of accountability as we see them for California licensed midwives are going to start with protected peer review. Licensed midwives and certified professional midwives have a strong culture of peer review. However, in California, licensed midwives are currently not on the list of healthcare providers that are extended protected peer review. Protection means protecting the participants in peer review from being subpoenaed in the event of of a license or incident investigation and/or a lawsuit. CAM and CALM have plans to put forward a bill that would add licensed midwives to the list of care providers with protected peer review. CALM will then have recommended peer review guidelines and a mechanism for incident review with trained and experienced reviewers for sentinel events. Lastly, accountability is not possible without getting feedback from the people we work with and the people we work for. So the plan is to have surveys, patient to hospital, patient to midwife, midwife to hospital, and physician to midwife, particularly when there's a transfer that occurs. Also essential to a quality care program is ongoing education and training. There is sometimes a cultural overemphasis on normal in midwifery care, but an essential aspect of midwifery care is clinical judgment and emergency skills. While midwives may also do social and emotional labor support, their primary function is supervision, clinical assessment, clinical decision-making when variation or complications arise, and responding in a timely way when urgencies and emergencies arise. Also, just as important are transfers and corrections before situations become urgencies or emergencies. Midwives can also enhance their skills for professional assertive communication, for instance, using SBAR for handoffs. Does everybody know what SBAR is? Situation, background, assessment, recommendation. It's an acronym for the elements that you want to communicate when you're making a transfer. So what's next? In conclusion, a statewide quality care program will further the integration of midwives in California, facilitate better collaboration, and calm transitions to higher levels of appropriate care, and ultimately support midwives and clients toward improved safety and outcomes for planned home birth and birth center births. The pace at which we will implement this will depend on the financial and volunteer resources we can put together. We will be starting with the calm transitions. That seems to be the thing that the midwives and everyone can agree where we can make the biggest impact. So we're moving that forward. So what can you do? What can we do together? Midwives can support a CALM QA program in their community. They can join a work group to coordinate CALM workshops or help update and expand our clinical guidelines. Physicians can help build bridges and opportunities for dialogues. Healthcare advocates can ask their local hospital to bring a CALM transitions program workshop to their hospital. And policymakers can help by creating and supporting initiatives to support integration. For instance, a bill for protected peer review. So, I hope you've remained calm through the presentation. Keep calm, call a California licensed midwife. Our time today was limited. I hope this was informative. I invite questions after the meeting as well. Feel free to contact us via email or telephone. Thank you.
Thank you. It was helpful. Good work. Yay. All right. Any comments on this agenda item? Seeing none, I'm going to move forward to discussion and possible action on future Midwifery Advisory Council meeting.
I'm sorry, did you invite the audience?
I did.
That was, okay.
I saw nobody raise their hand. I know I went kind of fast, but I did ask. Okay. All right. So, council members, tab 10, page 47 of your booklet. We need to choose some dates for next year. March. I have on 16. Okay, so March 9th or March 16th? Anybody have preferences?
9th for me.
I'd rather have the 16th, but. And if I remember right, Passover and Easter in April this year.
I'd rather do the 16th too, if that's possible.
Yeah.
The 7th, 8th is BRN meeting, so I don't know where they let, the Board of Registered Nurses likes to meet in interesting places around the state. So,
Well, the 8th is my birthday, so I was hoping maybe for a
so
long weekend.
that's, I'm gonna
somewhere.
recommend doing the 16th only, because for me, I don't know where they're gonna have me showing up at.
Can you still come on the?
Yeah, I can come
Yeah,
on.
yeah, but if that,
All
if it
right.
becomes
Is
necessary.
everybody
yeah.
okay with the 16th?
I mean, I'm happy to do whatever you want,
Okay.
but unless you have a reason to do it.
Do I have to have a motion?
You will at the end.
You know,
At the end.
Yeah,
We
we
can
do
do
all
all
of
of
it,
them.
but dates are usually determined by motion.
Okay.
No, you,
And then for the August meeting, either the
I would do the 17th.
10th or 17th of August?
I would put 17th, the same reason you just had the other.
I don't have a preference. Anybody have preference for August?
I do the
Yeah,
17th.
17th.
17th?
I
Because
can't
we are
come
in,
the
there's also
10th.
the 8th and the 9th.
Okay, and then December next year. We can have the 7th or the 14th.
I prefer the 7th.
Me too. Anybody else have
No
druthers?
preference.
Okay. So I move that we meet next year, March 16th, August 17th, and December 7th. Have a second?
Sounds good. I want to thank staff for putting a calendar in the back of the book.
Mhm.
Oh, I just now found that. Thank you.
We also provided the right year this time.
We're
improving.
Nobody said anything, Natalie. Nobody remembered that.
I never
All
forget.
right. You want to call the roll on that for us, please?
Dr. Adams?
Yes.
Ms. Dugan?
Yes.
Ms. Holzer?
Yes.
Ms. Marcelin?
Yes.
Ms. Yaroslavsky?
Yes.
Ms. Spartavan?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. We're up to agenda items for the next Midwifery Advisory Council meeting, which would be March. We will already have on the agenda my update, an update on the Elmar Task Force, an update on midwifery legislation if that's needed, an update on regs for AB 1308, and the normal updates in the midwifery program. Does anybody have something else they'd like to add? That's in program update, isn't it? Isn't that part?
it'll be its own agenda item.
Okay.
So wait, March 16th.
Oh, right, because we're going to actually vote on one, right? Okay. Anybody have anything else? Thank you for that. Nope. Seeing none. All right. Somebody want to move we adopt those agenda items?
Yeah, you don't need to.
No.
I mean, it's a work in progress, right?
It's a work in progress. That's
Staff
true.
comes up with other things, she'll bring other things to the table, so it doesn't.
Yeah. Okay. Any public comments? All right. Everybody is done talking. I hereby adjourn this meeting. Thank you all for attending.